Hi, and welcome to week 5. I thought we'd mix things up a bit, and I'd actually talk to you all face-to-face, or at least face-to-computer. So at this point, you have all finished the week 4 posting, which was about poetry. I know that some of you, well, majority of you expressed a lot of displeasure with the poetry, and Elliot, Ezra Pound, Marion Moore, they're all a very difficult bunch in many ways. So I completely understand your stress and strain. So we'll talk a little bit about this just to give you an overview. Just to let you know, week 5, which started on February 3rd and runs through February 9th, is focused on modernism. It is focused on fiction, with you reading a little bit of Sherwood Anderson, Weinsberg and Hands, reading Catherine Ann Porter's Flowering Judas, and reading Hemingway's The Snows of Kilimanjaro, and Fitzgerald's Babylon Revisited. These are fairly representative of the I guess you'd say, of the modern period in literature. You're going to see a lot of questioning of ontological certainty. You're going to see a lot of kind of almost realistic and naturalistic undertones with a tendency to be a bit more pessimistic. You are also going to be reading a little bit more poetry. You're going to be reading some E.E. Cummings, some Wallace Stevens, and you're also going to be reading some Robert Frost and Carlos Williams. And H.D., Hilda Doolittle. Sorry, my nose is itchy. So these are going to take you into pretty much the period shortly before or shortly running concurrent with World War II. So we will then be shifting to week 6, which is the period of time between February 10th and February 16th. Now, that is really what we would consider our midterm week, but because this is a 10-week course, our midterm really falls between 5 and 6. So, as you've seen, the midterm exam is open from today, the 4th, at midnight, all the way through to the 14th at midnight. And you must complete this, you must complete it by the 14th. The midterm only covers weeks 1 through 5, lessons 1 through 9. And then, of course, we'll be setting up, after the midterm, there's no readings during that week, so we won't start back up our readings until week 7, which is starting on the 17th of February. So, let's talk a little bit about what you saw in poetry. And then we'll talk a tidbit about the observations that you made in light of the midterm. So when I was going through the fiction and when I was going through your discussion boards, I was really kind of comforted by the amount of work that you are all doing and putting into your posts. I have such very high hopes for our midterm and our final, because it seems that you are all very comfortable and conversant with many of the kind of the structures. You're doing a good job of telling your reader what you think and then showing them through evidence why he or she should believe you. There was a slight issue with a couple of the posts in that I'm seeing that some of you are pulling from websites and not attributing that. You want to make sure that you use MLA, the MLA handbook. I was going to grab it, but it's way back there. You want to make sure that you are citing. If you use any sources that are not your own, you will want to make sure that you cite. I would highly recommend just, inserting a little in-text citation using MLA, and then, of course, a little reference. A couple of you, I posted that you would not receive credit until you cited, and so if you will please cite, I will reevaluate your discussion post. However, if you don't, then that's going to be viewed as an instance of academic dishonesty and/or plagiarism, and I know that's not your intent. So I just want to make sure we clarify that. So, in light of what you all did for your postings, I think that I saw a variety of observations. Like I said, many of you, David, Karen, Stephen, Mary, Anna, Melanie, you all kind of thought about these ideas of modernist poetry as being kind of difficult, and that poetry, even though it's a few words, needs to be processed and needs to be explored. And David really, Prince had an excellent analogy when he said that David viewed poetry like a fine wine or expensive spirits, and it processed slowly, more care and time, and that short stories were like cold beer, which I think is a great way to frame your reading and to frame your understanding. Many of you mentioned that in a station of the Metro, which was so short that it seemed like it'd be so easy to read, but at the same time so difficult, that most of you did mention this idea of fleeting, this idea of parting, this idea of, I guess you'd say, moving through something very quickly. So I do appreciate that you attempted to read Ezra Pound's work and really think about it as it is. I know that I communicated via IM chat with a couple students who had some issues with this poem, and it's really key for you to think that in all actuality, Ezra Pound was part of the Imagists, which are the group of poets who were really involved with kind of trying to create poetry that captured the moment, the image, and so the feeling, the whole ethos of that moment. So sometimes in his writing, it doesn't appear to be as thought out or symbolic, say, as a person like T.S. Eliot. But this is just a strain of modern poetry called the Imagists that really kind of galvanized Pound for a bit. Many of you really had some tension with T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, which is one of the great works of the modern time period, and it is really important to have read it. Now, while it's important, is it important to see if you actually enjoyed it? No. It is a text that has been described as an encyclopedia of mythology, an encyclopedia of the modern period, and I'm sure that many of you, as you went through it, really did see and hear some of those observations. And I think that's what you need to do with poetry more than you need to do with short fiction, is you need to listen to it. So I always really recommend reading it aloud. I think that Eliot's poetry in particular, and as you see with E.E. Cummings, Wallace Stevens, H.C. Carlos Williams, and then with Robert Frost, reading the poetry or having it read to you, like listening to a YouTube clip of it, will be very helpful, because it does help you to galvanize this understanding of the poetry. I think a lot of the times when we're reading poetry, we forget that it's not, the context is not being set for us. Like in short fiction, honestly, we're given plot, character, setting, we're told feelings, we're told emotions, we're given everything we need, and then we pop into, let's say, a poem like The Wasteland, and we have here, April is the cruelest month blooming. And we think, what the heck is that? You know, that is giving us a time period, but April doesn't bloom. You know, it's more of a metaphor, more of a symbol, less of a plot. And then it continues, The Wasteland continues popping into, you know, hurry up, it's time, to a wealthy couple sitting in a room listening to a gramophone, to a group of people by the riverside, to the sense of da, da, da. You know, and it doesn't have this linear or this kind of plot-driven story, so it's often hard to jump in and out. That's why for many perspectives, poetry is an experience. Poetry is what you hear and what you feel, not so much what allows you to be guided through. And poetry is like opera. You either enjoy it or you appreciate it, but you'll never kind of, I guess you'd say, learn to like it. You kind of have this sense of, I enjoy it, I appreciate it, I hear it, I see it. And then for other people, it's not even in that realm. And poetry, for the most part, is a visceral reaction. You either enjoy it, you see the fluidity of it, you like to get into it, or you don't. So overall, like I said, I think you did a good job of engaging the sources for this week, and I look forward to seeing how you interact with the knowledge that you've built of modernism, with the knowledge that you've built of poetry, and then taking that into both the poets and also into the modern writers. Hemingway, of course, is one that most of you are probably comfortable with. For those of you that are in Montgomery, Alabama, which I'm not sure how many of you are, then you're probably familiar with Fitzgerald and the Zelda Fitzgerald Museum and things along those lines. You might be familiar with Fitzgerald from the recent film The Great Gatsby, which was an adaptation of his famous novel. You probably are less familiar with Catherine Ann Porter's Flowering Judas, but it's an enjoyable text. And then, of course, you have you also have Sherwood Anderson's Hands and Winesburg, Ohio, which is a beautiful short story. And he actually, Anderson actually influenced Hemingway, and Hemingway looked up to him and actually had him read his writing. So, okay, so this kind of gives you an overview. Moving to the midterm is open, so you can access it now. The midterm does not, you can access the midterm. You can go in through the ProctorU. You should have that already set up. Once you go into the midterm has a series of responses that you're asked to consider. It has a time limit of 2 hours. What you're going to want to do is once you go in, and you will be provided through the proctor all the information that you need. The exam is, like I said, proctored. If you do have questions, you can email me. The questions are focusing on short responses, very much like your discussion postings. Each response should be about 250 words or more, so no fewer than 250 words. I'm actually looking for about at least one good paragraph to 3. So 1 to 3 paragraphs would be your key for each response. You may take your book. You may take your notes. You may take your hard copy information. The only thing you cannot take is any kind of electronic media. So you can't access the website or the course or these videos. Now, I would also strongly urge you to go ahead and look under week 6 in the discussion board area. And this actually, I posted a study guide. And if you want to share the study guides that you complete, I'm more than happy to allow you to do that. It does say anonymous, and I know I've had a couple people post and ask questions about it. And so, kind of gives you some perspectives, and you may bring that study guide into the midterm. If you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to pop in, ask me a question, email me, etc. Thanks so much, and have a great day.